We're going to do a little introduction on Gottlieb's System 3 pinball games. This series of games started in 1989 with lights, camera, action, and went up to 1995 when Gottlieb went out of business. The Gottlieb System 3 games are a good, solid, dependable pinball system. They solved most of their issues that they had with their System 1 and System 80 games that were predecessors to System 3. They are significantly different in style and philosophy to the Bally Williams stuff. So there is a little learning curve, but it's still the same basic ideas. Just the execution is a little different. And that's what we're going to talk about today. First, let's talk about the board system a little bit on these Gottlieb System 3s. We're going to be using the Stargate for our example here. This game uses a lot of flashers and they go off a lot, including in attract mode. They don't last a really long time because of that, and also they don't use number 89 flashers, they use number 67, which have a slightly different life and voltage properties. Inside the back box, of course, we've got our dot matrix display panel, which I will fold down. We've got our CPU board, which is right here. Notice it uses a coin style battery, okay? Now normally it's soldered to the board. On this one I've replaced it with a socket and I use a replacement CR2032 battery because they're more readily available. It runs a 6502 processor. Over here, connected via ribbon cable, is the driver board. This handles all the coils and also all the lamps. We've got a sound board with an auxiliary board up here. This is very common on these games. Right dead in the center, we have a 5-volt power supply with a trim pot right here, which these trim pots typically do fail. They do like to fail. You can dial in the 5 volts using them, but really that's something that should be replaced. This board here is the auxiliary power supply for the soundboard, and over here is the dot matrix controller board. That's the board that actually controls the dot matrix display. On Stargate, we've got an auxiliary driver board with some more FET transistors. This allows for more devices, and that's largely because of this rope display was required for that on this particular game. So you will not generally see this board on a lot of the System 3 games. It only used on some of them. On our cue ball wizard, things are fairly similar, except of course we don't have the rope lighting, and because we don't have the rope lighting, we don't have the auxiliary driver board inside the insert panel. But the rest of the boards are pretty much the same. See, on this particular game, I still have the soldered in battery on the CPU board. That's the original battery running on this game. So this game came out in 1992, and that battery is still good. It's a small lithium battery, and they really do last a long time. Again, driver board, main 5-volt power supply, auxiliary power supply for the soundboards, and the dot matrix display controller board over there. So you can see that the inside of these games are very similar. On the driver board, one thing that Gottlieb did that was very smart was they used MOSFETs for the driving transistors. All the devices, the flash lamps, and the coils use these MOSFETs. And the reason why this is nice is that where Bally and Williams were using tip transistors, these MOSFETs can be driven directly by the TTL chips up here. That is, they don't have to go through a pre-driver transistor to a tip 102 and then ultimately maybe to a tip 36. There's many levels that are not needed here. You just have the driving TTL chip, transistor to transistor logic, to the MOSFET, and then out to the coil. And then this way, when something blows up or you have a problem, there's less to repair and less to diagnose. Just because the game uses MOSFETs instead of TIP transistors doesn't mean that it really works any differently in regards to how coils are activated. I can still use an alligator jumper wire connected to ground and hit a particular driver board MOSFET tab and make a particular coil fire or flash lamp fire. So that doesn't work any different just because it's MOSFETs. One quick word of advice when working on Gottlieb System 3s on your dot matrix controller board here, never unplug any cabling going to this board when the game is running. Because if you do, almost for certain, you will blow up this PAL chip right here. Williams and Bally, sometimes you can undo the ribbon cables and some other cabling, but if you do it with the power on with the Gottlieb, you will blow up that PAL chip. The PAL chips are replaceable, but it's a custom chip for this board, and you can only get them from Great Plains Electronics or Pinball Resource. The dot matrix displays used on the Gottlieb System 3 games are the same as all the other brands. They look red because of a filter in front of them compared to orange for Williams, Bally and Dataeast, but they are identical, the exact same display. The playfield, Gottlieb did use optic switches, much like Bally and Williams games did. And the optics are infrared, just like they are in Bally Williams games. And actually they use the same infrared style receiver and transmitters. So they're interchangeable between the Gottlieb and Williams, the little LEDs that is. Under the playfield, Gottlieb also had boards to read the optic switches. They exhibited some of the same problems that the Bally Williams boards did. That is, the resistors did like to vibrate and break off. While we're under the playfield, we can talk a little bit about Gottlieb's use of relays. For instance, here on this cue ball wizard, there's a bank of 3 relays. 2 of them are for general illumination. For example, when this one pulls in, it turns off the back box lighting. When this one pulls in, it turns off the playfield lighting. This one here is the flipper relay, or game over relay as Gottlieb likes to call it. So when I hold that in, the flippers become active. Usually this relay is mounted on the driver board, but Gottlieb, for some reason, like to have external relays, open frame relays, mounted under the playfield or on the bottom board. Likewise, for motorized devices, there's a relay up here that when I activate it, you can hear it, it moves the cue ball on the top side of the playfield. So Gottlieb did use relays a lot, opposed to Bally Williams, who got away from the use of relays and went totally to electronic control where there would be no moving parts. Another interesting thing that Gottlieb did was use these things called smart switches. So these are just standard playfield rollover switches. Here's one for the out lane, which I'll show you right here. Actually, they use it for both the out lane and the in lane. And what these are is they're like a membrane style switch. So instead of having contacts that can get dirty or that need adjustment, the stress on the membrane as the switch closes is what registers smart switch. They don't wear out very often and they don't really require any cleaning, so they are kind of a neat thing. When they do go bad, they are somewhat expensive. Flippers are pretty standard on Gottlieb games. They use a standard and a stroke switch, and they are not electronically driven. That is, they were driven by the relay we talked about, the game over relay that's on the bottom board. They do also have a little board right here associated with the flippers, and what this does is it senses when the player presses the flipper buttons by monitoring the voltage going through the grounds on the flipper buttons, and that's what tells the game that somebody has hit a switch for like a lane change or something of that order. On the inside of the coin door, there are some interesting switches. First is the slam switch, which is right here. It is a normally open switch, unlike, say, earlier System 80 games where this would be normally closed in System 1 games. The slam switch is important on this game because it's the way that we're going to exit the diagnostics, and we'll talk about that in a second. There's usually a door interlock switch. That is, when the coin door opens, the game powers itself off. This particular game does not have that, but most Gottlieb System 3s do. So if you open the coin door, it's like turning the power off on the bottom of the game. Coin door on the Stargate, again, you have to pull the interlock switch out or close the coin door to turn the game on. I just, for testing, just pull it out and it locks. In addition, here inside the coin door is the diagnostic switch and diagnostic board. This includes the game's volume control and the tournament switch, which helps. If you want to put the game on free play, you have to have the tournament switch on. If we press this button, put the game into diagnostic mode. And this is a little bit different than the other, Williams, Bally, Dataeast games. the diagnostics aren't quite as robust. I have to go in the exact order that Gottlieb wants me to go. So first is a memory test, followed by a lamp test. This tests all the lamps, which is a nice test. Then there's an individual lamp test, and I can scroll through the lamps by hitting the flipper buttons, left and right. And then if I go through again, I can go through the coil test. And again, using the flippers, I can go to a particular device and then hit the start button, and it will activate that device. Now the switch test, it'll show me closed switches. Like right now it's complaining that there's a ball in the out hole, which there is, and there also that the tournament button is on. And we talked about the tournament button. It's on the board where the test is. So I'm going to turn the tournament button off, and now the out hole switch is the only switch closed. So I have a lot of drop targets down. It kind of is confusing because it shows me every switch that's closed. You know, sometimes that's good to know, but a lot of times that's just overwhelming. So, you know, I encourage you whenever you go to the switch test is to reset all the drop targets. Now, if I want to exit the diagnostics, the quickest and easiest way is to just close the slam switch, and the game will go back into a track mode. I hope you liked our quick overview of the Gottlieb System 3 games from 1989 to 1995. For more information, go to pinrepair.com, and we have a repair guide on these System 3 games that should help you with bigger problems that you're having with this era of game.